Ready?
I got a lot to say, so here we go.
Ready? 1, 2, go.
Visible Shell began as a simple thought I had about human interaction and reaction to emotional response. The original thought involved only one component of the finished piece, which was visible containment. This artwork marked the beginning of a new direction for me and my work, letting me down a path to more interactive work that could engage a larger audience. I did not know at the beginning that I would end up having a secret army of volunteers. This project began as a solo endeavor, but during the 12-month incubation of Visible Shell, it was my love for my community that made it grow into a fully interactive piece. The project involved a long process of body preparation for the weekend. From doctors to nurses, I discussed the body and the head, hoping to leave no stone unturned. Thanks to a good friend and fellow artist, Eric Glissman, the original planning of the shell itself began on a tailgate with a tape measure. We took multiple measurements so that the shell was designed to fit my body specifically. It would allow me to sit, stand, stretch, and turn around, but that was pretty much it. Over the year-long process, there were some tweaks and changes, but it pretty much stayed the same. The final layout of the work involved additional chairs where planted observers would join the performance for 2-hour shifts. The piece was designed to be entered and exited in a clockwise motion to show the passing of time. The performers wore specifically selected jumpsuits with the word observer on the back. On their heads, newsboy caps. The outfits were all planned to have a unified appearance. Well, it was Friday. My catheter was put in, I put on my coveralls, my hat, and I returned to location to begin. Live streaming cameras were running, first shift observers were ready, the producers were ready to keep watch. I entered the piece in a clockwise motion, ducked to enter the shell, and heard the drill, screwing me in to my home for the next 48 hours. It was then I began to write the first sentence that came to mind. I focused on my writing during the first 5 hours. I learned a few things. One, I had to let go of the production control because I was stuck in a box. My bum really hurts on a high chair. It was raining and I was really hoping it would stop, and I did not care for catheters much. As the rain continued into the first night, I was so grateful for the volunteers that sat through their shifts no matter the weather. The observers were there for multiple reasons: to keep a close eye on me, to create a safety barricade around the shell, and to draw people into the work. The extra chairs were there for random people to sit in silence and become a part of the piece. The paper for the work was hand-selected. The colors helped display the passing of time. The highly attractive compression socks were yet another step taken to prevent blood clots, as was the hourly standing and marching in place. I never, ever knew how dangerous sitting still really was. The short jumpsuit was also so that the catheter had plenty of room. Now, the one sentence. I wanted the whole piece to be fresh and unrehearsed in any way, so I agreed that the first thing I wrote in the shell would be the sentence I repeated for the next 2 days. The sentence was, "To see myself, I went inside my own shell." As the exhaustion set in, the sentence fit into a square format that helped my memory. I was now heading into late morning on Saturday. A wall was hit and things started to break down. My body was rejecting the diet and the weight of exhaustion set in. I had a rule to stay awake for safety. If I fell asleep, no one would know if I had passed out. My observers were instructed to wake me if I nodded off, which they did. It was at this point I truly lost sense of time. What came next was a complete surprise. I began fasting after 12 hours into the work, and by Saturday evening, my body relaxed and I felt a true sense of calm. I was no longer sore and the exhaustion was at bay for the time being. My connection to the digital world was disconnecting and I was no longer anxious. It was also at this point that my room for movement was really restricted due to the rising paper, but I did not care. As the second night set in, the temperature dropped, and I really wished I had a scarf and some long pants. I wrote through the evening, shivering even though I had a small blanket. I cannot remember a time in my life when I was waiting for dawn quite like I did that evening. What overwhelmed me was the fact that up until this point, I was never alone. There was always someone there. Well, I made it to Sunday. The clouds were clearing, the writing was slowing down, and the thoughts of finishing were setting in. The message of the work was addressing two main issues. One, that as a society, we no longer have time to sit. And two, in American culture, it is considered a weakness to openly display emotion. I had been sitting in silence for over a day and a half at this point, with nowhere to hide what I was feeling. The temperature began to rise, and we had to take the lid off the shell before I was cooked. I ran out of paper, so the writing had come to an end with just a handful of hours left. All I had for sanity at this point were my observers and the crowd that began to gather. With nothing to do but to think, the end, I found myself overwhelmed and humbled, all at the same time. I had absolutely no idea how deep this project would touch people. I was never alone, and I saw some of the same people over and over again. I wondered if they knew exactly what it meant to me that they were there. I watched My observers approached slowly with the drill in hand. I sat patiently awaiting my departure and completion of what was a 48-hour outdoor performance piece. They circled around the piece in a clockwise motion and walked up to the shell. And finally, those 4 little screws that had contained me were removed, and I was free to exit. I talked a little too fast, obviously. As I walked away with the catheter in tow, the surrounding crowd began to applaud. Before I could fully exit the piece, the tears welled up in my eyes and fell down, and the smiles finally arrived. I had reached my goal, one that at times, I haven't read this without crying, I thought I would not overcome, but the world had a different plan for me. I stood in front of the crowd for a quick Q&A. I wanted to talk to all the people that I had seen in the last 2 days but was unable to converse with. I wanted to answer the questions that they had had about why, and believe me, there were a lot of questions as to why someone would do this to themselves. Staring out at the crowd, I spoke about what Dallas is and what Dallas can be. I can only hope that I opened a door for other creatives to come outside and put their words into a public place and their work into a public place. Dallas is full of opportunity. If you have an idea here, all you have to do is start asking the questions and pave your own path. I know that this work personally touched me and amazed me. The crowd reaction has still left me in awe of what is this great city, Dallas. As a final step, I encourage people to take away some of the writings as a thank you for being part of a piece that was an entire year of my life. It has left me inspired, and I will continue down this path to create works that engage the viewer and invite them in to participate. Thank you very much.